On this episode of Carnage, we're going to have a serious crack at getting our V8 Lexcen started. For those of you just joining us, we bought this Toyota Lexcen Wagon 2.5 years ago. Yes, it's been that long, but the idea was to build a V8 Commodore that's not actually a V8 Commodore. All right, this is a Toyota Lexcen Wagon. They are a rebadged Holden Commodore. They were built under the button plan, so if you're interested in learning more about that, look it up on the internet. I'm sure you'll find something. But yeah, they're one of these weird rebadged models. They are a Holden Commodore, but they're not a Holden Commodore. You know, the VIN number is Toyota, all the other badging is Toyota, even though it come out with basically the same driveline and body shell as a Holden Commodore. So our plan was to build a V8 Commodore that's not actually a V8 Commodore. It's not, you know, yes, it's a V8, but it's not a Commodore V8, it's not a Holden V8, and yes, it's a Commodore body, but it's not actually because it's Toyota badged and everything. So, and we figure, what better engine to use than a Toyota V8 in a Toyota car? Now we got given a Toyota Sora and it had the V8 in it, so we pulled that motor out, pulled the engine down. It's got all good parts in it, so you know, it's got rod bolts. We did re-ring, re-bearing it, new gaskets, head studs, camshafts, got Kelford cams in it and springs and everything. So it's got some good gear in the engine, should be a good engine. And then we've gone and bolted a G40 Pulsar turbo to the side as well, just for more fun. So we're going to throw some boost into this thing, and it should make some decent power. We're looking at between 500 and 600 rear wheel horsepower. So this should make it a pretty stout sleeper, you know. And it will be a bit of a sleeper. We'll be able to roll into a cruise night or something like that, and everyone will be like, huh, what would you even drive that here? And then lift the bonnet and everyone will be like, oh wow. That's actually pretty cool. So a lot of people love this car and we love this car, but we need to get it running. It has dragged on a little bit. You know, we've been distracted by shiny things along our way, you know, running 8s with the Mazda, running 9s with the Trovo, you know, try and get Taxi doing its thing as well, plus building a V8 twin turbo ute. So there's been a lot going on and we keep getting distracted, but right now I want to try and get this thing fired up. Last episode, we did try and fire it up, but to be honest, we weren't really ready. You know, we finished assembling the car, you know, getting the converter in, getting the box in, tar shaft, exhaust, all that stuff, but there was still a lot of wiring stuff missing, and I forgot to, you know, do some things like, you know, earth the ECU, which gave us some problems, but there is a whole lot more involved than even I was thinking. So I'm going to run you through some of that stuff, and it's information that you will need moving forward if you want to do a Haltech install on a car. This is all going to be very useful information for you guys, so you can just, it'll save you some drama, because it's caused me some drama, and I'm going to impart the information to you to save you drama down the track. Some of it you may think, oh God, that's simple, how'd you screw that up? But these are things that happen just during normal car builds. So I'll run you through all of that. All right, so you may have noticed I've still got a lot of jury-rigged stuff on this. And people may say, you know, why haven't you connected it all up properly, Scotty? It's because I was unsure of locations of certain things, and there's no point permanently running wires to things and then finding out the thing that you want is at the other end of the car. So at the moment I'm just trying to get the car started and running, and that way we will know everything is in the correct location, and then we can make proper looms and wires to run to those locations. If this was a clean sheet build, it would be easier than trying to integrate an ECU into a already running car. So and I was talking to Zane about these things the other day actually, and he's like, people get shocked at what it costs to put an aftermarket ECU in a car. And it probably shouldn't be, but they are always shocked at the price, and that's because there is so much involved in putting an ECU into a car. Even a plug-and-play ECU still requires extra wiring and all that sort of stuff to work with your extra sensors and all that sort of thing. So, you know, when you're doing these things, expect that it's going to cost you money if you're paying someone to do it. If you're doing it yourself, expect to find a couple things that you didn't know, unless you watch this video and I will run you through some of these things, because I gotta say, yeah, it's been a journey of discovery, and I've made some screw ups, but it is what it is. So for this build, we are using a Haltech Elite 2000 ECU. It is the one out of the Troubo. We're using the Haltech IC7 Dash. We're using the Turbo 400, the full manual Transbrake Turbo 400 that was in the Troubo as well, so we don't need to control that with the ECU, thankfully. It's just engine control basically, and the engine, obviously loom I've built myself to run to the Haltech, but we need to integrate that into the car. So, you know, the Haltech will obviously do whatever you tell it to do, but only what you tell it to do, and you've got to tell it, you know, so, and you've got to know what to ask. You've got to know what questions to ask. I mean, any computer's only as good as the programmer, and in the programmer in this case is me. There is no base map for a 1UZ, and certainly no 1UZ into a Lexcen. So Haltech don't have a base map for it. You have to kind of create it. So you go in and you basically set up your configuration, you know. How many cc is it? It's 3969 cc. It's a 4-stroke piston engine. It's 8 cylinders. The firing order is this, 18436572. So, which brings me to my first kind of screw up I made. When you're doing a Haltech installation like that, follow the bloody instructions. Well, there wasn't so much instructions as in the wiring diagram. I made the stupid assumption that if I just connect my injectors and my coils up to wires that are dedicated for injectors and coils, that I would be able to reconfigure the assignments for those wires in the ECU. You can't. They are set up unconfigurable. So basically where it says injector 1 on your loom and on your ECU, that is what it's going to be. So I've had to repin some stuff in my loom to work with the wiring diagram. It's my screw up, but it's something you should be aware of. Don't just go, you know, saying, oh, there's my 8 injector wires, I'll just terminate them and then jump in the ECU and assign where those wires go to each injector. No, look at the wiring diagram first and terminate. My screw up, but it's just something people need to be aware of. The second screw up, don't connect your ECU to power and to the coils and engine and injectors without having a map in there. It will hurt stuff. I don't think I've hurt the ECU, I think the ECU is fine, but I did definitely cook a couple coils because I had the ECU, like I should have separated the engine part of the loom away from the ECU when I powered it up. I didn't do that, and smoke started coming out of a couple coils. And apparently it is a common issue. I've talked to a couple tuners about it, and yeah, don't do that. They have all learnt the hard way. I'm trying to save you that grief. So if you are powering up an ECU for the first time hooked to an engine, disconnect the coils for starters, because you don't want to go cook some coils because, you know, they're over $100 each. And if you destroy a few of them, it's going to hurt you in the hip pocket. So I definitely did that. I can even show you a couple melty coils. They're still on the engine. We have some on order. They will be here later today. But yeah, if you come down here and have a look, actually I'll whip that one out and I'll show you. Yeah, she no good. So that coil is no bueno. So that one and that one, well, they were actually there and there, but I've swapped some coils around to do some stuff. So yeah, I've got a couple coils on order. Hopefully it's only the 2 coils. They were the only 2 that got hot. The rest of them were fine. And yeah, so just something to be aware of. Don't hook up an ECU without the proper map to your engine with everything hooked up. Make sure you disconnect the coils separately. Kind of might sound like a no-brainer, but if you haven't done it before, this is my first time I'm doing something without having a map in place and having a actual manufactured loom, like built by someone else that knew what they were doing. So yeah, I'm learning some stuff, and it's obviously costing me some things, and yeah, we're working through it. All right, so we've learnt from those exercises. So I've got the coils on the way. I'll get them in an hour or so, and we can get closer to starting this up. Some of the other things that we need to deal with. We're working with a car that has its own loom, its own instrument cluster and all that sort of stuff, its own electronics. Now we've deleted the factory ECU, and we've deleted the loom that comes with that factory ECU. So when you typically hit the key in an EFI car, you're telling you're powering up the ECU, and the ECU will then trigger a relay, like one down here, to fire up the fuel pump. We don't have that ECU anymore. We have an aftermarket ECU. You might say, oh yeah, you just hook up your aftermarket ECU. Well, typically aftermarket ECUs talk to aftermarket fuel pumps, and you know, that's pretty simple. But what we're using is a factory fuel pump in the factory tank to then feed a surge pot with 2 aftermarket pumps in it. They all have to be powered up, and they all have to be powered up off the key. So obviously I've got the ignition key here. It connects the ECU, it powers up the ECU. So I had to find out what wire in the car runs to the factory tank and which one is it. It's this relay here. And in fact, actual fact, it was this relay, and it's important that you know the distinction, because this relay actually requires a signal from the oil pump saying it has oil pressure before it will activate the fuel pump. Like, it will activate the fuel pump to, like, you know, preload the circuit, the fuel circuit, but it won't fire up the car unless it has oil pressure. So I had to delete that relay, because the car has no oil pressure right now, because it's never had oil pressure in, you know, it's never been this car, it's never run, so it doesn't have oil pressure. So I've had to delete that, insert another relay that doesn't require that, and then that now activates the trigger wire, which I've got there. So this is the factory Lexcen loom, and it's powering this trigger wire that runs off to the trigger wires to the rear pumps as well. So basically we're running 12 volts in to that wire. That activates the relay activates the fuel pump feeds the surge pot feeds the fuel rails. All right, so these are the things you've got to think about. Another one, starter wire. Again, using the factory ignition, you want to fire up the engine. Now if you've been watching the videos, you'll know that we set up the starter motor with the wires on it. It's all under the intake manifold, which is a pain in the butt. So there's our power wire to our starter, like our main power, and there's our trigger wire for the starter solenoid. So again, you got to run 12 volts to that. It has to trigger off something, and I've discovered it's this wire here. Now we'll do this all proper later, but you know, you got to discover these things and find out where they are before you can actually do something with them later. And of course, the first time I hooked it up, guess what had happened? The wire had come off, the activation wire for the solenoid had come off the starter motor, so I had to pull the manifold. So make sure if you're doing stuff like that, you have it seated properly, because yeah, I'm hitting the key, nothing's happening, so therefore I had to pull all the manifold off, do some jigging in there, get the wire on there properly, so then I could hit the key and make sure the starter actually turned the engine. When you're doing that though, make sure you have the fuel pump fuse pulled, because otherwise you're spraying the front of the engine with high pressure fuel, which was fun. Could have been disastrous. However, these are little things that happen when you're rushing and you're not thinking about things. So what happens when you hit the key with the fuel line not connected? Well, it will spray fuel everywhere. Thankfully, I was right here at the key. I could shut it off, and so we didn't end up with fuel really everywhere. But yeah, that could have been bad. Anyway, these are all things you've got to think about. So we are very close to getting this thing started. So I've got the key of power here. We will set this up, like I said, better later. That powers up the car. And then we have our key ignition to power up the ECU. When you turn the key, you're hearing things. So, fuel pump, fuel pump, fuel pump, fuel's flowing in the injector rail. I have an issue right now in that my fuel pressure is not reading correctly at the moment, but I will sort that out. Let me just plug that back on. So we'll get that sorted out in a little bit, but yeah, it definitely has fuel, as discovered by the key and spraying of fuel everywhere. Yeah, we know it has fuel. So, right now, if I hit the key, it will turn over and it will try and start, but I don't think it will start just yet. Let's have a look. So close. It is so close. I know I've got something wrong. Well, I've got 2 dead coils, I know that, so it will need 2 healthier coils in there. And of course it could be more than 2, but at the moment we know there are 2 that are rooted. So, but you heard it, it was so close. Zane's going to come up in a sec and give me a hand with a couple of things. But yeah, we are so close to firing this thing up. Something else you've got to do before you get this far is you've got to hook up a timing light. Now, this is coil on plug. And what we had to do was poke that down into our number 1 spark plug, put our coil on there, put our timing light around there, and then measure the timing angle on the balancer. And once you've got that timing angle, like when you've got top dead center lined up on the timing light on the balancer, then you put that information into your ECU for ignition tuning. No, sorry, which one was it? So this is where we've had to put in our TDC angle. So as I said before, when you put on your timing light, you're looking for top dead center. When you get close to that, it will take you will have to make adjustments. And our number was 375 degrees to get it on TDC. So they're looking for a number between 0 and 720 degrees, you know, being 2 times 360, being that it's a 4-stroke engine, and to have a firing sequence, the engine has to turn over twice, so yeah. Anyway, so 375 was our number, and that's a number you have to find with the timing light. You know, Howtech will give you a certain amount of information, but it's not all going to be spot on. Like I said, no timing map or no Howtech map, so you're going to have to sort of work your way through it, and that'll happen with any engine that's not super common. You know, if it's a LS or a V6 Commodore or a 2JZ or any, there will be maps, and that makes life so much easier. And that's how we've done it in the past, because almost all the engines that we've dealt with in the past have been pretty common engines. This, while there are a lot of 1UZs out there in the world, almost everyone is doing, you know, their own sort of map. So yeah, thankfully I was able to get a sort of a base map out of Gerardo at G-Force Racing Solutions. Thanks to Gerardo. It gave me some groundwork to work with, but obviously it was a very bare base map, so we've had to add to that as well. So yeah, sometimes, you know, dealing with things like this, if you reach out, people will help you because they've been through it before, And generally the car scene, people will help each other where they can. It's actually running. It's not right, but it's actually running right now. Oh my God. What did you do? I get it. Like, as I said, there's no maps for these things, so we're kind of making it up as we go along. I'm excited, but why do you sound so bad? But I'm excited. Hey, it runs. That is running. So I'm just taking this cam cover off at the moment just to see where the cams are at. But we just did a bit of a heat check. So based off the short amount of runtime we've had so far, there's some warmth in the dump pipe. But if you feel this side of the engine is dead cold. All right, the exhaust, dead cold, no heat there. Feel this side, and it's almost at the edge of burnies. That's getting quite warm. So all the firing is happening on this side, not that side. What does that mean at the moment? Not 100%. Either we've got a setup problem in the ECU, but I don't think so. It seems to run, while it runs like poo, it's running. And I'm wondering if we've killed more coils than we initially thought. So we knew we had 2 dead, definitely, but they were like melted dead, like, you know, I'll show you. I mean, you've seen it, but like, they are dead. So, question is, did we kill more coils that are not showing evidence? You know, have we killed that entire bank of coils? Don't know. How many cylinders are we running on at the moment? Don't know. So the Lexcen runs, sort of. At the moment, this bank's firing, that bank is not. Is it a coil issue? Don't know, but we're going to find out because I'm going to take these 4 coils, pull them out and put them in that bank and vice versa and see what happens. So if changing these coils to that side means that bank runs, then we know we've got a problem with our coils. If it makes no difference at all, then we know we've got a problem with our setup or wiring. I don't think it's a wiring thing. I've checked the wiring 3 times. I don't think that's a problem, but you never know. All right, let's change these out and we'll see how we go. The important thing is we have oil pressure. All right, let's do a test. All right, that should give us an idea. That's still cold. There's no, I don't feel any real heat there at all, or any heat, you know, so. See, that's got, ow. So we've been looking around at possible causes, like what could cause a whole bank of coils not to fire, and we thought, well, what do they have in common? They all have common power and they all have common earth. So I thought, let's check the earth first. You know, given that 2 wires, I had them crimped together and bolted to the back of the head here, and I undid the connector and found that 1 wire is pulled out of the actual crimp. So I suspect that's our problem. I hope that's our problem. If it's our problem, that's amazing. It's really annoying, but it'll be amazing if that's our problem. So I'm going to pull this off, re-crimp it. Like, I don't even know how that came out because I can't even pull the other wire out. So, there we go. We'll re-crimp it and attach it back to the back of the head. Hopefully, it all runs. Hopefully. Okay, so I have reconnected the earth. Let's see what this does. Nothing. Fucking Jesus. It's probably got an exhaust full of fuel. Something else going on there. All right. Interesting. So it runs, sort of, badly, but it does run. Not running as well as we'd like, but them's the breaks. We've got a lot of testing to do. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to test every coil individually and make sure they are all firing. I've got some other stuff I want to check on as well. Obviously it is not firing quite right, and yeah, so we've got some work ahead of us. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort it out, we're going to get it all running. By the time you see it next time, it's going to be running properly and perfectly, and you're going to see all that on a future episode of Carnage.